Well, before we begin our discussion of how to build surveys, it'd probably be a good idea to talk about why we need to use surveys. So surveys are designed to provide us with a specific sort of data, and that's data that comes from respondents. In other types of research that we can conduct, we acquire data from other, often more objective sources. Whether those data are coming from observations that we're making, or they're coming from behaviors that we're tracking, or things that we have some ability to quantify without asking people to tell us what they think. In the social sciences, however, and that's fields like sociology and psychology and fields like that, we're very concerned about what people think. And of course, marketing research is derived from those sciences. And in marketing research, we're extremely concerned about what people think, because we're often asking them about their perceptions, or about their satisfaction, or their engagement, or their likelihood to purchase something, or things like that. So we have to ask people what it is that they think, or what they want to tell us about what they're thinking. So we get an insight into what is actually going on in their mind. Now, the other thing that surveys can provide us is basic factual data. You can ask people facts like, how old are you, or what zip code do you live in, or how much money do you make, or things like that, and we can get basic factual data from them. Of course, one of the problems with asking people about those facts is that they don't always tell you the truth. We're not basing those necessarily on objective criteria. So, if you ask people how old they are, if they are a little bit older, they tend to underreport their age, and if they are a little younger, they tend to overreport their age, at least depending on the survey. If you ask people how much money they make, they may not tell you the truth. If you ask them how tall they are, how much they weigh, they may give you an answer that varies from what's actually true. And you have to consider even the objective sources sometimes. Like, if you looked at driver's license data, for example, my driver's license says that I weigh 220 pounds. Well, I haven't weighed 220 pounds in a while. I hope I can get back there, but 220 pounds is what I weighed when I got my driver's license. In fact, I maybe even weighed a little bit less than that. I was just the number I gave them. So data that come from respondents are not always objective. They're not always true. They're approximations of fact. They're not always fact, and that's important for us to remember. Surveys tend to provide us with a quantitative assessment. Now, surveys don't have to be quantitative. They can also be qualitative. But quantitative means that we're going to be looking at numerical data. We're going to be making comparisons between groups within a sample or a population. And that's typically what surveys are designed to collect, is quantitative information. So why would you want to use surveys? Well, surveys allow responses to be standardized, and this is one of the nice things about them, is that they ask questions in such a way that we can get comparable answers. Now, again, how you ask a question really changes the comparability of that question. For example, if I ask you, how are you feeling today? You might say, I'm fine, or I'm good, or I'm well, or I'm tired, or I'm busy, or whatever. You might have kind of variable answers. But if I ask you, how are you feeling today? Here are your choices: good, okay, not so good, or bad. And you can only answer one of those choices. I can standardize the answers a little bit, and I can have some comparison between those answers that's a little bit easier than having to take every single answer and compare them and turn them into categories and things like that. So think about, when an instructor in a course like Marketing 377 is assessing you, the reason that they use multiple choice tests or true or false tests is because that's a standardized way to test what you know. It's much easier to analyze and to understand what a group of people think when you have a standardized approach. A less standardized approach, like essay questions that require a bit more interpretation, take a lot longer to grade, I can tell you from experience. So surveys are typically also pretty easy to administer, and that's actually one of the reasons why they're often over-administered. Because surveys are so easy to hand out, lots of people like to hand them out, and I get hit up with surveys almost every day, no matter where I go. If I go to the gas station, if I go to a restaurant, if I just open my email, I get a survey. And the surveys are often very short, or designed to collect some kind of information about service or something like that. But they're persistent. They're everywhere. It's because they're just so easy to hand out. Surveys can help us to obtain deep data and to delve into thought processes. Now, again, surveys tend to explore what people say, or what they think what they say about what they're thinking, and so they can help us to go into the mind of someone in a way that you can only really do through verbal communication. I mean, if you're observing someone, you're kind of at an arm's length. You can't really see what's going on in their head. But if you're talking to them and they can explain themselves a little bit, then you can get a better idea of what they think. Also, there are lots of statistical analytic processes that you can use with quantitative data in particular that can allow you to kind of go beneath the surface and to kind of understand things about people that they might not even understand about themselves based on the data that you've collected. Now, the next point, of course, is that surveys are easy to analyze, and I do want to point out what I was just talking about are more complex forms of analysis that are well beyond what we're going to learn in this course. But even so, what makes surveys easy to analyze isn't just the relative ease of generating descriptive statistics. And I mean, it's really easy to generate means or modes or medians or standard deviations or frequency counts or frequency percentages or things like that because we have software that can do that for us so easily. And even if you know how to do it by hand, it's not that hard. It's just kind of tedious. They're easy to analyze because the data are in a form that are built for analysis. So, survey data is typically not that difficult to compile and to deal with. Again, it might be tedious, but it's not difficult. Other forms of data, like observational data and behavioral data, can actually be extremely challenging to analyze because you have to set a lot of criteria about what you're looking for, and then be able to make comparisons between those criteria, which means you have to transform the data into something different, and that can be a lot more difficult to look at. Surveys can give us data that allow us to see differences between groups, and this is really at the heart of a lot of quantitative data in particular, but as we've mentioned before, when you're doing a descriptive study, when you're doing a quantitative study, there's a lot of overlap, and one of the main goals of those kinds of studies is to collect enough data about a large group of people that you can make comparisons between subgroups within that group. So you can look at males versus females, you can look at juniors versus seniors, you can look at people that are highly satisfied versus people that are not so highly satisfied, and you can get information about what makes those groups different. And surveys make it really, really easy to do that. There are some drawbacks to survey research. One is that surveys, just by the nature of being tools that we're using to ask people to tell us what they think, they require us as researchers to make some assumptions that can result in bias in the way that data is collected. And we're going to talk about that in a lot more detail in future lecture series when we talk about error. But for now, it's important to understand that the way that you survey people can have a big impact on the way that they answer the questions. And so you want to make sure that you're not inadvertently biasing the information that you're trying to collect just through your mode or your style of data collection. It's important to remember that surveys don't always yield truthful results. And again, we know in the social sciences that people tend to lie about things. They tend to lie about all kinds of things, as a matter of fact. And there are effects where it's known that people tend to report things more positively or in a more socially acceptable light when they're talking to survey researchers than when they don't know that they're being interviewed. And of course, there are also effects like I mentioned before, where people just tend to not want to give you the most reliable data, whether they do it consciously or unconsciously. Surveys are also only as good as the sample that they're drawing from. So if you are asking a bunch of really highly qualified people about a topic, you're going to get really highly qualified answers. But if you're asking a bunch of people that don't really know anything, a lot of questions, and you're paying those people to be a part of your research process, they might just start giving you whatever information they have, but it might not be very reliable. So it's important to remember, and we're going to talk about sampling again in a future lecture series, but it's important to remember that survey data can be extremely untrustworthy if there's not a lot of rigor that goes into recruiting the people to participate in the survey in the first place.